The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, greetings. Welcome to another presentation in this public service nation-building series, The Law and You. This is program number 961, coming to you on Monday, the 27th of January, 2020. On this program, I will speak to you on the topic, the Budget Debate 1997. And let me, as usual, give my deepest condolences to all families which have suffered recent bereavements. The Budget Debate 1997. Well, may you ask yourself, 1997? Yes. Because I want to bring you highlights of the presentation I made in Parliament during the 1997 budget debate, which was my very last budget debate in Parliament. And I do so conscious of the fact that today, Monday the 27th of January, should have been budget day, but due to the unfortunate death of our Governor General, to whose family I send my deepest condolences, the whole budget exercise has been put off until next week. So next week, Monday afternoon, we will hear the budget presentation from the Minister of Finance, and the debate will commence among other members on Tuesday. Of course, in the course of last week, we would have heard the debate on the estimates. Ever since I started studying political science, way back when, in 1965, I have become fascinated with the whole question of governance. When I returned from my formal studies in Canada in 1968, I got immersed in local quasi-political activities. They were not fully political as yet. But my overt political activities began in 1979. Since then, my views have not changed about the wastefulness of our political system. In fact, the longer I live, the more I am convinced that our system needs to be changed. Our political system, that is. It is wasteful, and in our particular context here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, it merely encourages tribalism of the worst kind. Exactly 10 years ago, we tried to do something about it, but the people did not find favor with our efforts. And we have remained with the same political system we have inherited from the British. And we seem incapable or unwilling to do anything about it. And therefore, what we have passing for debate during the annual budget exercise is nothing but a rehashing of the positions of the respective political parties represented in Parliament. Now, for some reason, when I prepared for the budget presentation in 1997, I knew deep down that it was going to be my last budget presentation in Parliament, my last contribution to the budget debate in Parliament. Don't ask me why. I simply knew. And as I read the speech I gave, and extracts from the speech I made in Parliament when I spoke in the 1997 budget, when you listen to what I have to say, you would realize that these are the words of somebody who knew he was not coming back to that assembly to take part in another budget debate. And so it turned out. The presentation did not go down well with my parliamentary colleagues. And when you hear what I had to say at that time, you would understand why. And let me give you the context in which I was speaking. On the 18th of December 1997, when I spoke in that budget debate, I had resigned my position as Attorney General in September 1995, and I was what is called a backbencher in Parliament. I had no portfolio, and traditionally backbenchers have more freedom of speech than those who hold ministerial portfolios, because ministers are bound to toe the government line. You're not permitted as a minister to depart from government policy in any significant way. The Constitution says so. The Constitution says that ministers are collectively responsible to Parliament, and therefore the principle of parliamentary collective responsibility, as it operates in England and in all systems which have a parliamentary type government of the Westminster kind, ministers are not free to give their own opinions unless their opinions coincide with that of the government. Ministers are constitutionally bound to support government policies and to advocate them. A minister who wants to habitually depart from government policies has to resign, or he would be dismissed by his prime minister. So I spoke with freedom from office. But I also spoke in the context of, at the time, being chairman of the New Democratic Party. And I had been chairman of the NDP since 1986. Therefore, I held a position of political significance. So when I got up to speak on the 18th of December 1997, this is what I said, and I will be reading from the official Hansard, except that I will skip out passages which would make it lengthy, because remember, at the time I had 45 minutes to speak. On this program, I now have just about 20 minutes left. And therefore, I have to skip out much of what was said. But I intend, if it be the will of the Lord, one day to publish this speech and the other speeches I delivered at various points of my political career in their fulsomeness. Excuse me. Perhaps I should say one more thing. As I read what I uttered 23 years ago, you will see the extent to which nothing fundamentally has changed about either the parliamentary system or parliamentary so-called debates. So this is what I said. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, mine is the last but one contribution in the annual ritual that we call a budget debate. I would like to begin my presentation this year by looking at the budget debate. It should be clear to any citizen listening to this so-called debate during the course of this week that something is seriously wrong with the way we do the nation's business in this parliament. Something must be wrong with a political system that pits people against people in an attitude of permanent hostility, where periodically the people are asked to choose one side or the other. The winning side takes all, and the losing side is left to grovel in impotent rage, biding their time until the tables might be turned when they can repay all that they have suffered with compound interest. For we have a political system based on party politics, which turns ordinary, likable people into a species of humanity called politicians, thereby transforming them until they are well nigh unrecognizable. I continued, I have been part of this system for a long, long time. I too have been on the opposition side for the greater part of my involvement in public affairs since 1969, and I too know what it is to be in opposition, languishing in impotence, making suggestions to government that inevitably fall on deaf ears. Listening to budget debates by oppositions, which I listen to sometimes in silence and sometimes with continual interruption. Speeches which make not one difference to one word written in the budget or to one figure in the estimates. And this cannot be a political system of which we can proudly take with us into the 21st century. Indeed, in 1972, some of my colleagues in the Educational Forum indicated in an article republished that perhaps this system was made in England for the British, was parceled and marked not for export. The parliamentary system is capable of providing democracy under the right conditions. But the way the parliamentary system has evolved in the Caribbean and in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is anything but democratic. Years ago, when some of our present parliamentarians meditated on these things and subjected the society and its history to rigorous intellectual analysis, we had the glimmerings of a framework whereby we could transform the political system into a truly democratic system, responsive to the needs and aspirations of the people. Over time, these intellectual efforts have succumbed to political expediency, and we have all we have all fallen into line and have now become the bastions of support for a system whose shortcomings we know only too well. And so we continue the traditions. We have budgets prepared since time immemorial in conditions of almost military secrecy. We come to Parliament, loyally support our respective sides, and we pay no attention whatsoever in a serious way to what is heard from the other side, because some are government and some are opposition. Those who are government support the government. Those who are in opposition oppose the government. Never mind what was their prior stand on many of the issues of the day. Never mind the experience of countries like St. Kitts, like Dominica, and like St. Lucia, where opposition parties are now in power and are singing a tune vastly different from the tune they sung when they were in opposition. For it is one thing, as Prime Minister James recently reminded this nation when invited here to speak at as a speaker feature at the convention of the opposition party, it is one thing to be in opposition, but it is another thing to be in government. We in the New Democratic Party government found that we too, and we even before that in the forum discovered that it is one thing to criticize, but the system channels you into a particular modus operandi when you get in the office, out of which it is impossible to break unless you change the parameters of the political system itself. So the new government in Dominica found that all the it had criticized the philosophy which led to the setting up of WIBDECO and the banana arrangements. When it got into power, it not only embraced that which it had criticized in opposition, but it sought to refine and further the very thing which, in opposition, it has castigated as unworkable and a waste of time. And he told the people, if I can recall what he said correctly, that in a sense he became disillusioned when he became Prime Minister. There are no other institutions in society in which opposition is institutionalized and permanent. There is no board of management of any company, be it local, regional, or international, where you have some members of the board on one side and the other members of the board on the other side. There is no civic organization where you have built-in opposition. But in our national affairs, our political system tells us that we must have an institutionalized opposition and an entrenched government. A government that is a beneficiary of the winner-takes-all political system, and where governments generally run the nation's business mainly on the philosophies and manifestos of its party, to the exclusion, almost totally, of any involvement of the other side. Election does not solve anything in these countries. Elections mainly provide new masters and new servants, if I may use that rough categorization. So that as we sit together to debate a budget, we rarely deliver speeches prepared beforehand, and speeches which can be delivered either from the government side or the opposition side, regardless of the contents we call the budget. The document is really the occasion for bringing us together on radio to parade. In those days, we had no television coverage of Parliament. We just had radio. For those who just tuned in and didn't hear my preliminary remarks, I am reading from the last address I delivered in Parliament in a budget debate, which was delivered in December 1997. And as you can glean from what I have said so far, I was highly critical of the whole idea of a so-called budget debate, where nobody was listening to anybody else. At least those in government were not listening to the opposition, those in the opposition not listing the government, and in any event, nothing said on either side led to the change of one word in the budget or one figure in the estimates. I continued my presentation. I have issued a public call some time ago, and I intend to take up the call for a national political stock-taking. We have to sit down. We have to find the goodwill between those in government and those in opposition, and not just talk about constitutional reform. We have to talk about basic systemic political reform, a reformation of attitudes. We must aim for the ideal. We may not achieve the ideal, but we must aim for it, so that a budget exercise should be a gathering together at a round table of all the people elected to serve in the office and those appointed to discuss in a rational and brotherly atmosphere the best options for our people at a time when we are running out of developmental options. And when we are agreed as people sitting around the table of a board of directors or people on the executive of a national organization, when we are all of one accord, then we say to the nation, this is the best that your sons and daughters in office collectively can produce for you in an ideal political situation. But will we ever approach this ideal? Will we ever approach this ideal? I will leave off the reading at this juncture and continue hopefully next Monday. And if it be the will of the Lord, when I do the program, when you hear me on the program next Monday, the budget speech should have been delivered by the Minister of Finance. So I hope you have benefited from this excursion by me into recent history. And I warrant you, when you listen to the budget debate this year, you will hear speeches from both sides reflecting their own position. But there would not be any opportunity for any agreement. You see, in our political system, as I will say later on in my speech, governments dare not accept ideas from the opposition. Lest they be embarrassed at being told that they have to rely on the opposition for ideas. And on the other hand, if the opposition in any of these countries in the Caribbean give ideas to the government, they don't expect the government to take them seriously. All right, well, at this stage, I want to take the remaining few moments of the program to pay my tribute to His Excellency Sir Frederick Ballantyne, whose funeral would be held this week, a state funeral on Wednesday. He was an outstanding Governor General, longest serving, served for 17 years. I have had the privilege of knowing him all my life because his uncle, Paul, Mr. Paul Ballantyne, was married to my aunt, Mrs. Emily King, now Emily Ballantyne. So that I grew up in an extended family situation where Sir Freddie was always a part. An outstanding patriot, a nation builder of the highest class. We mourn his loss and we thank the good Lord for the service he enabled Sir Frederick to give to this country in medicine, in business, and as our head of state. May he rest in peace. That is all from this program of The Law and You, program number 961. I look forward to being of further service to you next week, Monday, when I will continue reading from the speech I delivered during the budget debate in December 1997. Until then, may the good Lord continue to bless us all.
The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.